Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you guys an update on the willow plants. The willows have done really well. I'm not sure if this will be the last update of the year because there'll be at least another month or so of growing. But I think the next update will probably be the pruning update in winter time, and that'll be when they're at their full height. But I'd like to show you them now when they're looking at their best, full of leaf. As I say, they probably will get taller as the summer goes on. It's currently the middle of August. The growth's been absolutely fantastic this year. We did have quite a warm, dry spring, and normally dry conditions is not what they like. But because it was so dry, we had to water the vegetable patch quite a lot, which is just behind them. So any of the excess irrigation from the vegetable patch probably helped them out, and they managed to have plenty of moisture despite the dry spring. And then when it came into July was a little bit cold, so the growth probably slowed down a little bit in July, but it still kept growing quite well. Willows are quite good in cool climates, which is why they do so well in Scotland. So the cold weather didn't impact them too badly, but there's still plenty of moisture for them to grow with the cooler conditions. And in the last couple of weeks it's been really warm, or at least warm for Scotland. It's been around 20 degrees or so, and we've had some heavy thunderstorms, which has been perfect growing conditions for them. So they've had lots of sunshine during the day, nice warm temperatures in about 20 degrees in the day, 12 degrees at night. So they've been able to grow 24 hours a day, and they're looking pretty good for it now. So as you can see, they've grown a huge amount. They've probably grown over 4 meters now, so I think they might even break last year's record. Last year's record was well over 4 meters. I think it was about 4 meters 30, and this year they're already about that height. So with another month or so of growth, I suspect these could even get to 5 meters this year. You can see the willow arches here. This one's done better than the other willow arch, I think because of the way that this has grown, and I'll explain what's different with this one than with the other one. So when a plant grows, it will only strengthen up its shoot as much as it needs to. So for this, for example, you can see this top bit here was a shoot from a few years ago. It's really quite small and thin, but where the growth comes off from the side is much thicker, and from underneath is much thicker. So what it does is it's to compensate for the growth above, it thickens up below. So you can see it more clearly in this stem. Generally what you can do is add all the thicknesses of the stems where they join the main branch there, and all the side stems, the thickness should add pretty similar to the main thickness of the main trunk. So what that means is anything above where it splits off is a little bit thinner. So you can see as it goes up, the actual main stem doesn't thin until a side branch comes off. So you can see there, as every branch that comes off, it then thins by the amount that it branches off by. Now because of that, it impacts on how this grows. So the reason this one's done better than the other one is the branches on here, a lot of them have actually curved right over to the other side before they've grown. What that means is the whole stem has to thicken to support the growth on top. So I can show you this very clearly on this one up here. So you can see here, at every point where a stem comes off, you've got a much thinner bit of stem coming off of it. So this bit of stem here, it doesn't need to be very thick once it's past this point, because it's only got a bit of growth coming up here to support, whereas further down it's got all that growth to support, so it has to be really thick. So you can see here, nice thick stem, and then thin, and then gets thinner as it goes along, and it has all the side shoots coming off it. So this one has grown nice and thick because it doesn't have many stems further down. So from where it branches off all the way down to the ground, it's a nice thick stem, whereas some of the other ones, they've actually branched further down, and I'll show you that now. What that's caused is thick at the base and thin at the top. So this arch is a very good example of that. Most of the growth is actually on the sides. So what's happened is the lower down stems have thickened, but not the central stem. So what I might do next year is trim off all the lower growth, and just, so for example, if I have a shoot from the left, and instead of letting it have all the shoots on the left hand side, take all those shoots off, let it grow right to the end, and then just let it have shoots on the opposite side. That way it has to thicken this trunk up all the way to the other side of the archway, whereas if it just grows thick stems here, this thin section of stem will remain thin. And you can see it quite clearly in this one. It's got a lot of thicker stems coming off. So you can see here, for example, it's already getting quite thin, and it's only just coming up, and then by the time it gets to the top here, we've just got lots of thin growths, really quite thin stems, whereas on the other one we had really thick branches. These branches are really quite thin. So what I'll do next year is I'll selectively prune them so that the plants growing on the left hand side have most of their stems on the right, and the plants on the right have most of their stems on the left. That way I get a really thick archway. So they've done really well. They've given a really good defense from the wind recently, because they've got so big and they're covered in leaves. They're really helping as a windbreak. That's the main idea of these, is to give a windbreak but also to provide support for plants. So when we cut this back in winter, we get loads of stakes, and we basically just use them as bamboo. And I'll show you a couple of the stakes now. If I come around to this side, you'll see the stakes that we've actually used, and they've actually started to grow. We didn't really want them to grow, but we've let them grow. It means they won't rot, and it means that they've actually get stronger with age. So there was a few down here which wasn't actually supposed to be supports, they were just supposed to be markers as sticks, and these ones, as you can see, have grown 2 or 3 foot. There is one that grew about 6 foot. This one though, you can see it was just literally a tiny stick, probably about 20-30 centimeters in length. Pushed it about 2/3 underground and it's grown massively. Same with this one over here, wasn't supposed to grow. This was a tiny stem. This is actually grown over 6 foot, but we just kind of looped it over and tied it down. This again, as you look at the base, you can see it was originally just about 1 foot tall. That was the top of it there, and it's just all thickened up and started growing. The ones that have grown the best though are actually the ones that we've used as wigwams, or as kind of like a support for the peas. That's because these were put into the ground just after I'd cut the willow, whereas these ones down here, these ones were probably put in the ground 2 or 3 months after they were cut from the plant, so they weren't as vigorous. Also, these ones were much bigger sticks to begin with, so they had a lot more energy stored in them, and they've really grown big. They've probably doubled in height, so you can see originally they were just this high, and you can see now they've actually doubled in height. They've mainly shooted at the top, but they've also got lots of smaller branches down the side. Generally, the way that they grow is the hormone goes towards the top, and that encourages more growth at the top. It's to make sure the plant doesn't get shaded out lower down. It's a tree naturally, so it wants to grow tall, so it puts most of the strong growth into the highest point of the plant, not onto the lower down side branches. But you can see how much it's also thickened up as well. So for here, for example, we've tied it up with some of its own branches basically, and as it's swelled up, those branches have cut into it, and you can see it's really starting to strangle itself now with the amount it's swelled up. So that gives you an indication of how much this has actually grown and thickened over the summer. And not all the willow shoots have survived, so you can see here the differences, and this gives you a good example of how much they've thickened up. So this one here, I think this was the last wigwam we planted, so these were planted a little bit later than the rest, so the stems probably dried out that bit more. You can see how thin these sticks are, but these sticks were actually the same thickness as these back ones, which are thicker, these green ones, just that these green ones have grown for another year, so they've thickened up extra. So you've actually got an extra strong wigwam. These ones that haven't survived, they'll probably be too rotten in a year or two, whereas these thicker ones at the back, we can actually pull them out, cut the roots off, replant them next winter, and we'll just get a thicker, stronger wigwam each year. So I think that's it probably for the willow update. As I say, this is the best willow arch. It's kept nice and thick. That's because the branches have thickened up along the whole length instead of just thickening up at the base. So we've got a nice sturdy archway there. Also, this archway is about 6 months older than the other archway. So that's all for this willow update. As I say, I'll probably give you guys an update when I'm doing a pruning in winter. I'll then measure it to see what final height we got this year. But they've done really well, huge amount of growth, and you can actually see how thick the stems are starting to get now. Really quite thick stems, quite big plants, and every year it looks like they're going to grow bigger and bigger. So it's probably going to be a few more years until we get to their full size. Last year each plant only had 1 stem. This year each plant has about 5 stems. So although they're not a huge amount taller, probably only going to grow about 2 or 3 foot taller than last year, there's probably about 5 times as many branches on each plant. And what we'll probably do this year, which will be different, is instead of cutting them down all at once and then losing our wind protection, what we'll do is we'll coppice every other plant so that we've still got half the structure up here. That way it'll be on a 2-year rotation, and that will give us protection more year round. Whereas at the moment we get great protection late summer into midwinter, but then when it comes to just after pollarding them, we got no protection from the wind right until the midsummer again. So I think that's what we'll do next year, give more protection, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the second year. What I expect is a lot more side branches to come on them. This year they've side branched a lot more than they did last year, so you can see Normally you just get in the first year just a single branch, but this year they've actually had side branches. So next year the ones that we do keep, they shouldn't put on much height. What the willows tend to do when you pollard them is in the first year they put on the height, and the second year they just put on lots of side branches. But in the second year with the side branches, they also thicken up usually. So these branches, if we keep them next year, they're the same length but loads of side branches, and they'll probably be about 3 or 4 times as thick. So that's all for this update, and I'll probably see you guys again sometime in winter.